Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be talking about comparison and file integrity in this webinar. Let's get started. We're talking about comparison, and that sounds a little bit trivial, but you'll see as we go through the presentation that it's far from trivial. And what I wanted to do was talk about pdfToolbox on one hand. That's why you have that nice pdfToolbox icon on the slide, and then talk about the solutions of Global Vision and the blue ball that you have next to that pdfToolbox icon is the Global Vision icon, and we'll be talking about a number of their products and how they can be used to do file comparison. This is the agenda. I'm not going to go in too much detail here, but basically we'll look at file comparison with pdfToolbox, what it can and cannot do. And then we'll progress from doing text comparison to artwork comparison, and as a last step, even looking at comparing a printed page or a ripped page with a live PDF file. So you'll be going through all of the different stages. And I'm going to start with pdfToolbox, and as usual, I'm going to take the opportunity here to skip my slides and go straight to the software. And slides are great to have as reference later on, but let me show you what I want to talk about. I don't know whether you know that the functionality has been in pdfToolbox for quite a while, but I find that there aren't that many people that know about it. But in pdfToolbox, it is quite easy to do file comparison. And what I have here as a demo example is the same ad I used last week, and then I have a slightly modified version that I think looks even worse than the original, but there is a difference, and that was the main point that I needed. Now, if I open these two files in pdfToolbox, I can, of course, switch back and forth and try to find what the differences are. But I can just as well simply go to compare documents that you have under the views or view menu. And compare documents is part of the visualizer in pdfToolbox, which is designed to visually look at PDF files and examine certain aspects of them. And in this case, the visualization is used to highlight the parts of the document that are different. As you saw, there was a color difference in that background behind the text between these two documents, and that is properly highlighted by pdfToolbox. There are some settings that you can use in here. It is basically maximum, medium, and then minimum sensitivity. Doesn't give you too much control, but you can see that it does give you some control over which differences are detected or not detected. But overall, it is mainly used to figure out if there are any differences in the document, and if so, where those might be. Now, what is even less known than this compare documents functionality that I'm showing here is the fact that this is not the only way you can use this. And to show that, let me go back to just having my original document, this ad here, and let's say that I want to run a fix or a number of fixes on this file, and I want to figure out if running these fixes changes my document visually. Well, it turns out that you can do this in a very convenient way in pdfToolbox, because that comparison that I can do manually can also be built into a profile. And then it's run automatically as part of running the profile. And to show that, what I've done is I've prepared a profile here. So let's go to Tools, Profiles, and then I have a regular profile built here. And if I go to Edit, you'll see that it doesn't have too much switched on inside of the profile. What I have is one fix and one check. Which fix it is relatively irrelevant. I've chosen font outlining as an example because sometimes people think that outlining fonts should not have any visual effect on the file. After all, it's the same information. You're just converting whatever is in the font as outline to a real vector element. So why should the file be different? So it's a good example to see whether that's true or not. Besides that fix, I also have a check in the profile. And this is the key to using that comparison engine. The check is used visual differences when comparing original and result. And if I go to edit, you'll see that it is based on a comparison condition that says, is the result file different? And then I have some parameters, and it gives a pre-flight error if the differences are greater than what I have specified here. So this is that same check that is used behind the scenes for the comparison tool that you have as part of the visualizer. How does this work? Well, if I add this check to the profile, as soon as pdfToolbox starts running the profile, it will execute a task. It will take a snapshot of the document. And that is kind of peculiar by itself, because I always tell people that pdfToolbox first runs all of the fix-ups in the profile, and then it runs the checks. Well, in this case, that's still true, but it does add a preliminary task to processing with a profile that has that check. And that preliminary task is creating that initial screenshot of the page. Once it has created that screenshot, pdfToolbox will go through the usual process of running all of the fix-ups that have been specified in the profile and running all of the checks that have been specified as part of the profile. And the last thing it does in this profile will be to take a second snapshot, an after snapshot. And then it compares, pdfToolbox compares the before and the after snapshot, and if there is any visual difference, then it will generate a pre-flight error. And that pre-flight error is reported just as any other pre-flight error will be reported as part of the running of a profile. We have this profile. All that rests us is to say analyze and fix. Because I'm fixing, pdfToolbox will ask me for a new name. Let me call that test and save it on my desktop. And as you can see, I now get, first of all, the indication that there were, in fact, fonts that were outlined, which we expect. That's the fix-up that we specified. And that apparently font outlining causes actually a difference in the file. And the reason for that is entirely logical. If you have text, it is rendered on the page with something that in PDF is called thin fill. If you have vector elements, there is actually an other rendering mechanism that is used, which is called fat fill. Basically, the latter means that as soon as a pixel is hit, even a tiny amount by one of these vector elements, it is filled completely. And that means that text that has been vectorized typically has a little bit of a bolder look than text that has not been vectorized. And if I open up my original again, we should actually be able to see that. So it's not very visible, but I'm actually not sure it's visible at all if you look at this on a GoToMeeting, but it should show up there. And so if I go back to the comparison tool to visualize what the differences are, then of course now it is much more visible what happened. And if I zoom in on part of the text, you can see that it are indeed the outlines of the characters where these differences appear. So that's the difference between those two rendering modes that are used for vector objects and text objects in PDF. You can run this in pdfToolbox desktop in the visualizer in a purely manual comparison mode, or as I've just shown, you can run the comparison engine as part of a pre-flight profile. And of course, because it is now in a pre-flight profile, I can also run it in an automated fashion. And I could do the same thing in a profile in pdfToolbox server and automatically get warned if something in my profile visually changes the file. But let me hide pdfToolbox again and go back to my presentation. The question, of course, is this technology usable in your workflow? And it's definitely has advantages. It's a very quick comparison engine. It is simple to use. There aren't too many settings to set up, so easy and quick. But what you'll find is that because the comparison is pixel-based, and because the settings that you can play with to set up the sensitivity are relatively limited, the technology also is limited to a number of use cases. And in some cases, it is just not good enough for what you might want to do with it. What is it best at? Well, the workflows where I have seen it used use a variation of what I have shown you in the demo. If you have a workflow where you're running profiles with fixes and you want to make sure that nothing in this file changes because of running that profile, then pdfToolbox is actually good technology to do that. You set the sensitivity to a maximum, you make sure that the page is rendered at a high enough resolution inside that visual check, and that will give you a very good accuracy in detecting any difference that may occur as part of running that profile. So in that case, it is really good, and it can be a very quick way of figuring out whether there are any differences or not. The technology is not made and not very good at reporting selective differences, meaning perhaps there is the chance that there are some color differences and you don't want to see those, but you do want to know if there are characters disappearing, for example. Well, in most cases, pdfToolbox will not be able to be used for that. It simply cannot be configured intelligently enough in order to do that, in order to detect some differences and neglect other differences. It also doesn't do any type of management of the differences. You basically get an overview per page. You get a yes or no, there are differences detected or not. In the visualizer, you get the overview of the entire page. There is no way to easily zoom in on each individual difference that was found, or maybe to figure out that some pixel differences belong actually to the same object, are part of one change between two files. There is no way to create a good report of the full list of differences in these files. So it is definitely limited to a number of use cases. And that is, of course, why we also want to look at other technology. There are workflows where you want to be much more intelligent when you're comparing files. And the technology that Global Vision makes is designed specifically to be used in those types of workflows. So let me first of all see if I can transfer myself as presenter to Thomas so that you can see his PC, which is downstairs. Let me do that. Yes. And then in the meantime, I will, there we go. So that's the other computer we need today. And in the meantime, let me start by explaining a little bit what we're going to talk about for Global Vision. If you look at the Global Vision product range, they have products that are focused on different areas of the full workflow. And the first product that we're going to look at is Docu Proof. And Docu Proof traditionally is used specifically in packaging workflows, and it is used not so much when you have finished documents already, but it can be used from the very beginning in a workflow where someone is starting to write a Word file with all of the text that needs to appear on a package. And in those early stages of the workflow, people typically want to make sure that that text that goes through revision after revision, that text can easily be compared between different revisions, so that people can be sure that the changes that were requested were in fact executed, and that the changes that should not have happened, that there are none of such changes. So you want to be sure that what needs to be changed is in fact changed, but nothing unwanted was added to the process. Now, DocuProof, and this is very important, you'll see that in the demo, but it is very important because we're also going to talk about PDF. DocuProof is a product that compares text and nothing but text. And that means that it can work with files like Word, Excel, XML, and PDF. But if it looks at a PDF file, it will only look at the text that is in that PDF document. All other objects are irrelevant at this stage and will be ignored. So that's something very different than the comparison that we've seen in pdfToolbox. And we'll, after DocuProof, we'll see some other tools from Global Vision that can do similar things as pdfToolbox. But for now, the DocuProof case, it is only text. Now, specifically for PDF, that also means that the type of PDF that you have is important. It needs to have live text. If you've outlined that text, as I did in my example in pdfToolbox, it will no longer work. If you've done transparency flattening, it will likely no longer work because some of the text will be, might be, but probably will be converted to either outlines or rasterized together with an image. If you've ripped the file, it will not work. So it is important what type of PDF that we're talking about in this particular case. Okay, let me give the word to Thomas, and he will show you in brief again. We're not wanting to give you all of the technical details, but he will show you some of the features of DocuProof so that you get an understanding of what is in that product. Thomas, all yours.
Okay, thank you, David. So in DocuProof, I will show you two cases. One that includes the comparison of a Word and PDF documents. The second, the comparison of two PDF files. So I will start with the first case from Word to PDF. So DocuProof is already open. You see two panels. On the left, you have the original panel and the right the revision. So in the original panel, I will open the Word document. I open it, and now I will open the PDF file. So I will start an inspection of that. With this button left click. You see there is already an inspection now. If you go at the top, you see the difference lists. You see the number of differences that he found. There is also the type of differences, like an insertion or a deletion. The operator can also add some levels. Here in the original one, you see the original text and the revision text. And the operator can also add some comments. At your right side, you have an inspection summary. Again, you see the type of differences again, and the numbers of that. And it's also related regarding with a color. When I go back to the difference list and I click on it, you will see, you will zoom in on the difference. And here you have the difference grids. You see more details of them. Like here, the original is an N at the end, and in the revision, an M. As an operator, when he was doing a review, you can add some info in it to these kind of differences. So if you click here on the level, I can add, it's a critical one, critical differences. Or I can add also some info in it, except I can also do another one, cases, and I add something rejected. When you do the whole list, you can include all this information in a report. So how you do that, you click on this button, click again, it will generate my report. Here it is. You see first an overview, a summary of the types of differences, also with the numbers. Some information about the files. We'll go to the next page, see more details of them. And at the end, you have a preview of the whole document, your file, and the differences are highlighted and included in the preview. I'll close it.
So let me point out for a second that, of course, this is a very different part of the workflow that we're talking about now. And you can see that this is really about text, and it is really about the preparation of a document. Like I said, this will only compare text and ignore all other elements on a page if it's PDF. But you can see that I can take the final design of that PDF, and that DocuProof will actually be able to match up the text I have in the Word document with what it finds on the package. You can do this even more intelligently than this, because it supports creating templates for these Word documents where it will automatically search for the information in a predefined format. And in many companies, they have standardized Word files where you have to enter all of the information that needs to go on a package. And you can create a template that can parse, if you want, that standardized format. And so it will only try to compare or find the text that was actually meant to go on the package. What you can also see in the demo that Thomas did is that this is much more than simply the comparison. In most cases, this is part of a workflow. It's part of a workflow where you want operators to go through this quality check and where you want them tracked, where you want to keep record of these changes. In many cases, because you have to. If you're in a regulated environment, you have to be able to prove that you went through these quality steps. Well, Docu Proof is a client-server product that can help you do that in a much faster way. It is much more accurate than trying to do this manually by simply printing things out and comparing them side by side. And it can track and store all of that information and make it available as part of an audit request from the FDA or someone else. I'll add one more thing as part of an exercise a couple months ago to try and see whether this actually worked. I took a Word document that we had written for a brochure for one of the products that we distribute, and I compared it to the final product that came back from the graphic designer for that same brochure, and embarrassingly there were 5 differences that no one spotted, and they weren't as bad as what you would end up with in a drug package, but it's still not good that copy-paste errors and a missing period at the end of a sentence and a missing double quote, I think it was, that escaped everyone's attention. And we did proofread it with multiple people. So this is a way to make the process a lot faster, and that's a huge advantage in many workflows.
I will show another example when you do only an inspection of selected text. I close this one, I open it again. What I will do now is with this button tool, I will select a part of the artwork, and if we run it now again, it will do only an inspection of that part, and also again in the difference list, and it's just the same like I told you before. I think it's time to go to the second case. That's comparing from PDF to PDF. You have the PDF. I open the first PDF file.
It's PDF to PDF, but keep in mind we're still looking at DocuProof, so you're still in the case of text comparison. So all of the graphical elements you see on the page, the colors could be completely different, the background could be completely different. DocuProof is going to ignore all of that.
So in this case, I will focus on the inspection of tables. As an operator, I will create 2 comparison sets. So a set that includes the table differences and another set that includes the other differences. So I will show you how we can do that. So first, I click with the right mouse on the table and select table, and also in the other document, select table, and I run the inspection. You can see here at the right, there is one set with only differences from the table. If I clear it in both documents, and I click again with the right mouse click and select exclude table, also this other document, exclude table, and I run it again, you will see I have 2 sets. First set is only the differences from in the table, and the second set is the difference from the other documents. You can also give it a name. So the first set I will give differences regarding table, and the other set other differences. So when I create again a report of that, you will see that also here in the report. Set 1 difference regarding table, set 2 other differences. So let's close that. I think yes, that's what I will show in DocuProof.
Again, the example with the different sets is one that might be worthwhile to use in a certain workflow. It might not work in other workflows. It really depends on which workflow you're in. But again, it shows that this is as much about finding differences as it is about managing the whole process of doing the quality control and storing those differences and be able to report on them accurately. So DocuProof takes care typically of the first part of a in many cases, packaging workflow where you have the design aspect and where you want to make sure that the text is accurately moved from one step in the design aspect to the other, or the design workflow to the other. At a certain point, you end up with a real file, a real PDF file that has a design and that is that contains all of the elements that you want. And then the second step in a quality control process in such a workflow is typically to make sure that as you go through iterations of a digital artwork file, a PDF file that you generate out of the Illustrator or whatever the native document is figuring out whether the different revisions of that file are again having the correct changes applied to them. So in this case, we're not only interested in the text, we're actually from this point on interested in all of the elements of the PDF. And now we come very close to the workflow that I showed with pdfToolbox. pdfToolbox was doing a pixel-based comparison between different PDF files. Well, ArtProof, the second product that we're showing from Global Vision, ArtProof is actually doing a pixel-based comparison between two PDF documents. Not just the text, but everything. Given that ArtProof is more expensive than pdfToolbox is, and given that pdfToolbox does a bunch of other things other than comparing documents, if they're both doing the same thing, a reasonable question to ask is, why would you use ArtProof? Is it better than pdfToolbox? And it turns out that it is a lot better than pdfToolbox if your workflow really needs a comparison that needs to be able to configured and tracked. And the first part of why is it better is, again, that process aspect. ArtProof, again, is created to allow someone to quickly go through the differences that it finds. And it's created to allow you to generate a report that can be printed and signed and stored in a binder so that you can be audited. But it goes further than that. It's much more than simply the managing aspect. If you remember what we could do in pdfToolbox, the information that you can get in pdfToolbox was basically this view on the page that highlights the differences, and then it's up to you to figure out what happened. Well, what you'll see in ArtProof, and we'll go look at the demo in just a second, what you'll see in ArtProof is that it does a lot of work to make sense out of these differences and to make sure that you only see the differences that you want to see. If you're talking about a workflow where you might not be as interested in color, but you might be more interested in other stuff, then all of these things can be much more configured in there. And you'll also see that the user interface is vastly superior if you're wanting to do these in-depth comparisons. Time to look at the second product. Let's switch back. There we go. And while I'm doing that, you'll actually see that Thomas will launch not ArtProof, but a product that is called ScanProof. And I'm not lying here or trying to lead you astray. ScanProof and ArtProof are essentially the same technology. ScanProof adds a number of tools to ArtProof that are specific for working with scanned documents or ripped documents. And we'll talk about that in the third use case. But we're essentially using the same product here to show you what ArtProof can do, and then in the next stage, what ScanProof can do. So that's normal. Thomas, all yours.
So first of all, before I start with my demo, David was talking about the fine-tuning things. To compare it, you can find here, if you go to Manage it, and here Digital, Modify, here you can find these kind of tools. If I do a demo, it's related to these kind of parameters. Two tablets where I count in artwork and content.
It would take us too far to go into all of the details, but you can see that the amount of customizability that you have here is really a lot better or a lot bigger than what you have in pdfToolbox. It goes as far as having multiple ways to analyze the data in a PDF file, to make sure that you find those differences that you're interested in. And you can see other things in here, like how many pixels should a difference be in order to be detected, and so on and so on. These things are sometimes important to some extent in ArtProof when we're talking about comparing digital PDF files, live PDF files, but they will become even more important when you talk about scan-proof and scanned documents, because of course, once you start scanning a document, you're typically introducing small blemishes into the document, and you can use these settings to filter out only the differences that you want to see for your particular type of document and for how that document is printed or reproduced.
In this demo, we'll compare two PDF files. We have two panels again, a master panel and a sample panel. The master panel will be your original file, your original PDF file that comes from Illustrator or InDesign. And the sample file, it will be your print. So let's start. I will open the master file. Here it is. I open it. In ArtProof, when you open a PDF, there will be always a dialog pop up where you can improve, modify your inspection. So you can do some things with the separations. You can toggle on and off, as you can see. Also, you can do some things with the layers, toggle on, toggle off, and have also some other options regarding overprints, annotations, smoothing. What I will do now is I will crop that artwork. For me, it's okay. So I will accept it, so it's loaded. What I will do now, I will load the sample file. Again, dialog pop-up. But for me, is that result okay, so I accept it. Because what I will illustrate is that ArtProof has no problems with different file formats. So you can start an inspection with different formats. So here I run an inspection with the button on the top. That's the result. As you can see in the middle, you have a preview. There's an of your inspection file. In the flashing mode, you see the differences. Each difference has its own box. And at the left side, you see an overview of the inspection area. At the right side, you have the difference lists, where you can see also type of differences. You have changes and deletions and insertions. If I click on it, zoom in immediately on the difference. Go to the other one and another one. So as an operator, when an operator does a review, he can add again some info to this kind of difference and include and exclude this to a report. I will show you how you can do that. First, click on it, you see it in preview, and you will say I will give it to a level. It's for me it's a critical difference, and I also add a comment because it's regarding Braille. I include that in my report, and I go immediately to the next one, to the next difference. That's related to color. For me, it's a major, and related to color, I include that. Okay, the next one for me is not important enough, so I exclude it with my report. If the whole list is done, you can again create a report of that, and that you will find the button here at the top. Generate report. Click on it, and then you see a new dialog where you can give more extra information regarding the product ID and the name of who inspected, the date. I will accept it here in this case. Create the report. So here it is. First page, you have an overview, preview of your file, and on the top, more info related to document, and below you have an inspection summary. You can see there is one repeat only. There are 20 differences, and I exclude one, and a critical is one, and a major is one. If I go to the next page, start with repeat one because there's only one repeat. There are more details, and then next we have more details, also with a small preview regarding to that issue, to that difference. And also you see the level that I gave to it and the comments, and so on and so on. You can also save that as a PDF, of course. I will close it. If we come back to that, you see that the application will find differences regarding Braille, also color differences and deletions, like here. I can also give you another tool. In ArtProof, you also can verify barcodes. That's an additional application It's here, and I click on Verify Sample. So in separate application, Start Up. And what can you do here? You can verify your barcodes to give you information about the type and the grade and some other stuff. If you click on this button here, you go to the first barcode and then the next one. It's only viewing and to see if everything is okay to print it. So I will close it. That's it for this demo. So we'll go back to David.
This was comparing two digital PDF files, two live PDF files. One of the things that is often missing is the next step beyond that. Because once everything is fine to create this PDF and to do version comparison between those PDFs. The question is, of course, what happens once you have that golden master, the thing that needs to be printed. What we've seen as well in packaging as in commercial at times is that there very often is no way to check whether a RIP, for example, does the correct thing or whether the actual print matches the original digital master document. And yes, you can compare these two side by side and stare at them, but that's not easy. Humans are not very good at finding the differences, hence the little kids game, find the 7 differences between pictures. And it gets significantly worse if you are using fonts or languages that you're not used to, because then you're not used to reading these things. So for us, a font that is Vietnamese or Korean or Chinese is very difficult to recognize that there is a little dot missing that completely changes the meaning of the word. So how do I take a digital PDF file and compare that to a file that has gone through a RIP and should be the same, but now as a TIFF image with pixels and no longer PDF objects? How do I print something and make sure that it's the same as the digital master? And I already indicated that ScanProof is the solution for those types of file comparisons. And what Global Vision does is it has a software product that is designed to offer you a number of tools to precisely do that comparison between a live PDF file and a scanned PDF file or a RIP PDF. And it also has a piece of hardware. Now, it's a little bit difficult to show you the hardware here. We didn't want to start playing with webcams on top of having 2 presenters. But there is a wide format scanner that uses digital cameras inside to do a high quality and quick scan of a printed page, and then sends that information to ScanProof so that you can compare it to either another scanned document or a digital document. So what Thomas will show you in the last demo here is how you can do a comparison when scanned data is available. And to keep it a little bit interesting, we're not going to do a comparison between 2 files that look the same, but we'll actually use this example file, an example file of a package, and compare that to a printed sheet where you have multiple iterations of the same of that same package. So there's basically a step and repeat, if you want, that has been done for that package on the printed sheet.
So for this last demo, we'll compare a PDF file and a repeat image file. I load only the master file, the sample file again, another one. So that's my repeat file. I open it. Here it is. What I will do now, I will just run it, inspection. As you can see at the right, you see that he detected 6 repeats. So they are calculated in the background. And if it's finished, it will be a red color. But if you see at the left side, you see there are more than 6 repeats. There are 12 repeats. The problem is 6 others are rotated ones. But for the application, is that not a problem? You have a tool that you can select to the application. Okay, find also the rotated ones. And that will also show you afterwards. But first, now it's all calculated, so I click on it. I can click on it, and it gives you also a preview of them. For the rest, it's all the same, but I will go back now to select that function, and that's here at the top, support rotated samples. When I activate it and I run the inspection again, you should find all the repeats. Like I said, if you look at the right side, you find 12 repeats. And at the left, you see that he indicates everything. The next on the fourth, yes. You see, so that's a nice feature of them. It's very useful. It's all calculated, and when it's calculated, you can go back to the other one. It's go very fast. That's for my part.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll go back to your presentation. So that was the last part, and that was comparing scanned or ripped data to an original or to other scanned or ripped data. You can actually compare two scans, which is something that is often done as well. And of course, the sensitivity of the settings that you have here, the fact that it is possible to configure this exactly to look for those changes that interest you, is even more important when you're working with that scanned material. Because in many cases, for example, people will say, well, I want to look at the smallest font I have in this document, and any change that is smaller than the size of the smallest period in that document, for example, I don't care. If there is a small difference that is a part of the scanning process or part of the printing process, but it is smaller than any of the type that I use in my document, then I want that to be ignored. In many cases, what we're talking about here is a workflow that is partly manual. As you've seen in the demos that Thomas went through, in many cases, what you want to do is do the comparison and then have someone go through these differences that were found and do an appreciation of what those differences are. Is this something that really should be identified as a difference? Is it something that is important or that we can safely ignore? That is a process that in many cases happens manually. You can automate these processes to some extent, however. There is a product called Smart Folders that Global Vision has, which allows you to set something up with hot folders in the cloud. You simply drop the documents in there, and the comparison is done automatically with the settings that are configured in that smart folder setup. And you get the report that is generated, so you can simply look at the report and find out if there are any differences. Likewise, there is a command line version of ArtProof, ScanProof, that can be used to do further automation. And Global Vision has integrated it, has made sure that there is an integration with the ESCO workflow product. There is one with the Kodak workflow product. There is one with InFocus Switch. But you can do other integrations because of this command line that you can feed with an XML file, basically, and then get, again, a report back in response. That is the last slide I had in my presentation as well. So basically, we started with pdfToolbox. I wanted to show you what pdfToolbox can do in terms of comparisons. I also wanted to make sure that you understand what the advantages and limitations are, because there definitely are limitations to the comparison engine inside of Toolbox. And then next to that, we looked at, with the help of Thomas, we looked at the text comparison between text and PDF files in DocuProof, and at artwork comparison in ArtProof, and scanned document comparison in ScanProof. So with these applications, you have a nice set of tools to do integrity checking or comparisons in multiple places in a workflow. Of course, the Global Vision tools today are mostly used in packaging-related workflows, either for food companies, consumer product companies, in many cases for companies that work in the pharmaceutical space. And Global Vision has both a non-regulated and a regulated version of the products, so that you can go through a complete validation when the software is installed, and that such companies are in order with all of the requirements of regulatory entities such as the FDA in the US. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I thank you very much for joining another one of the summer school webinars, and I'll see you next time.